down at 0-2. Still some momentum to build up, though, moving forward here. Up against, and I'm glad the last desk points this one out, the Leviathans and the Titans, your Worlds finalists from last year. Now, we only have 2 sets played. You can't glean too much, or for some of these teams, only a couple of sets played. Leviathans through 4 sets are 2-2. I think that's more eyebrow-raising. Titans down at 1-1, though, Trelly. I think we're in a spot now, before we move on to this match, talking about this matchup. You're looking at the SPL in general right now. Seems like every team can beat every team any given week.
Yeah, it seems like anything can happen right now. Again, you're sort of just trying to figure out the meta. You're trying to see where your team meshes.
Right.
Obviously, the Titans right now did just pick up SOT. They're still trying to mesh with their new solo laner, see, what strengths does he bring? Does he bring these sort of different styles of picks? Are we going to have to adapt to that? And that's sort of the meta that we have seen. I mean, SOT's been bringing out these assassins in the solo lane, something that Benji really wasn't up to doing back in the, the last season. So it's a different style. They have to get used to it.
Yeah, and just like I think we've said this about every team so far this phase, where we've seen 2 different Tartarus Titans through our 2 sets. They 2-0 the Jade Dragons in their first set of the year, and then the Titans fall 2-0 to the Leviathans just yesterday. So we have seen the good and the bad from this Titans team so far this year here in Season 9. And the good is still very similar to what it was last year in Season 8. Still a lot of the same strengths for this Titans team. I think SOT has brought a bit of a different playstyle, Trelly, and I'm glad you point that out, the need to mesh and sort of adapt and change around that playstyle. And the team check-in we did with the Titans supported that as well. And so in Phase 1, I think while SOT and the rest of the team is getting used to how the right side of the map might play, this is time for the veterans, for Paul, Aurora, and Cyclone Spin to really step up, to layers to get back to good old-fashioned layers, and so I have high expectations, really for the duo lane specifically here today.
Yeah, I would think that right now, Cyclone and Aurora have always been looking very solid, but have they been able to get off to this, real late-game carry?
Right.
Not so much. So, as you mentioned, Paul's always been looking pretty clean, taking 5 sometimes bans in the set and still able to find pick that he's able to flourish on. But one player does not a team make. You really have to be able to make those adjustments and say, hey, how are we going to get everyone firing on all cylinders, ready to, make these sets happen? So after getting 2-0, they're going to have to, make a strong comeback here against the Valks.
And one player does not a team make, something that can ring true for the Valkyries as well. Benny Q has really stepped up. We've seen moments from the rest of this Valkyries team where they've looked very, very good, very competitive as well. So in the last 2 matchups, Valkyries against Solar Scarabs, that one goes 3, Scarabs win. Valkyries versus Oni Warriors, that one also goes 3, where the Oni Warriors win. We're going to see what this Valkyries team is made of, Trelly, in the last 5 sets of the phase here. They've got Titans, Bolts, Jade Dragons, Leviathans, and Kings to end their phase now in their next 5 matchups. And we have seen some very, very clean Smite from this Valkyries team, and I think that gives you hope that there is great potential for this team to start taking some sets off teams.
Yeah, they come out swinging, no doubt. And I think it's more so because these teams aren't used to facing this rookie roster. Game 1, they sort of feel them out. The Valks have been able to take that, and then these seasoned veterans that have been around the SPL for a while are able to make the adjustments and say, okay, we know how to shut you down games 2 and 3. That's not to say that the Valks can't convincingly take a second set. They just have to get used to the league and figure out what it is they need to do to make their adjustments. If they are going to take game 1, and then lose game 2, they have to say, hey, all right, we figured out what we did wrong. We're going to look to, improve on this, that, or the other, and then take this game 3. Obviously, you have Aquarius, you have Wowie. They've been around the scene. They know how to make those adjustments, just can they execute?
Yeah, that's the big talking point here with this Valkyries team, where you have a couple members who have played in the SPL before. Then you got a few members of this team that are in the SPL for the first time. That's an adjustment period. There's time to get up to speed and get the chemistry rolling. One of those players, Kiermi, the jungler for the Valhalla Valkyries, getting up to speed in the SPL is very important. He is with me now for the pregame interview. Kiermi, first and foremost, congrats on making it to the SPL. It's been a lot of fun watching you guys play so far this year. We've talked a lot about the differences between SEC and SPL, and I want to ask you directly. You're in the SPL now, whether it's preparation, in-game play, scrims, things like that. How different is it playing at the SPL level versus the SEC?
The culture is very different. Of course, obviously, a lot of SPL players take it a lot more seriously, but also the pacing of the games goes a lot faster, and people will punish you within seconds if you make a mistake, where in SEC, you really did get away with almost anything you wanted, right?
Right.
So that's a big learning curve for us. I think one of the biggest things for us is that we're still just having fun and we're learning a lot, and we're not letting the losses get to us, which just means we'll improve that much faster.
Yeah, I want your take on how you're approaching maybe phase 1 in general. I think a lot of the teams around the SPL have said this Valkyries team, they need some time to get used to the SPL in phase 1, then phase 2 and phase 3 really could be a scary team. Despite losing, you've been able to take games off the SPL team. So how are you approaching just sort of phase 1 in general?
We're definitely trying our best in this phase, and it's unlucky that we're losing sets. Like, we have some really ugly games, and then we have some like super dominant games. I think it's important to show that we can absolutely go toe to toe with all of these teams, and that we are playing very well. It's just about keeping consistent with it and learning why we're winning and like following that method still.
You're going up against the Tartarus Titans today, a team that has had some good and some bad so far here in the SPL this year. Talk to me maybe a little bit about your matchup against Layers. How are you approaching dealing with Layers here in this set?
Layers is a talented jungle. I think he's somebody that we're looking out for this set, and I think we'll be able to confidently handle him though.
Excited to see what you guys bring to the table. Best of luck, and excited to see that first SPL win for you guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. The Valhalla Valkyries have shown some flashes, Trelly, and I love every word that I just heard from Kieran.
Yeah,
every single. That is a sharp young man right there. All the words that came out of his mouth, I really resonate with me. They're approaching the SPL with a fresh mindset, and having fun is so important because remember, this roster stuck together through the SEC. They knew that as a roster, they had the potential to be in the SPL, and they stuck together. And you form some great friendships over the years, approaching games like that. And so I think having that behind them is really good. And Kiermi didn't seem nervous at all in the pregame interview. And it really stands out there talking about the differences between the SEC and the SPL, realizing, look, we're not a team that's immune to making mistakes, and we've just got to get up to speed with the SPL. And I think this team is capable of doing so.
Yeah, it seems like everything he said, they're holding true, right? They're able to play at this level, and they've shown that. They take these game ones, but on the other side, how do you keep it consistent? How do you say, hey, we were able to outplay you guys game 1. How do we continue that through these 3-game sets? And I like that he mentioned that they're learning and they're not taking the losses too hard, because as the team, those rookie roster that is yet to get a win in the SPL, you really can't be saying, man, we weren't able to beat this team or that team. You have to be able to make these adjustments, as we mentioned, and I think their mindset is exactly what they need right now.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the fresh look, not getting down, and that's why I asked, like, how are you approaching phase 1, right? Are you a team that's taking even just a game win in these sets as success? And I think they are. I think they're realizing we can play some very clean Smite, and we are going to take that as our win right now. Worlds is later on this year. You've got a long time to go until the Smite World Championship, and while phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, they all matter, if your goal is lifting the hammer at the end of the year, then you realize that this is the time of year to take your lumps and get things rolling. And a team that has taken lumps in one of their sets so far is this Tartarus Titans squad, where up against the Jade Dragons looked very convincing. And then in the Worlds rematch yesterday, up against the Atlantis Leviathans, the Leviathans had a commanding set, taking it 2-0. Will the Tartarus Titans get back on track? Will the Valhalla Valkyries grab their first set win in the SPL as a roster? All that and more will be answered on the other end of potentially just a couple of games here. P's and B's, though, for the first of what could be a 2-game set. Kickoff right now as Daji ends up getting banned away. And so Kiermi already receiving a little bit of pressure here from the Titans, and goes right back towards Layers as well with your long Shen.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see if the Titans. I was gonna say, man, I didn't even get it out in time. If they're gonna put stock in this Shiva ban, it's because I talked to Kiermi after their Oni Warriors set, and I was like, hey man, you thinking it's gonna be a 2-0? And he's like, yeah, Shiva's OP, man. I'm gonna keep getting this Shiva, and they immediately banned it away, and they didn't give it to him. So I think the Titans did their homework here. They saw what Kiermi was able to do on this Shiva, and they're just gonna put the respect on there, saying, we don't even want to deal with it. Maybe it's just the fact that we haven't seen it enough. We don't really know what it can bring, but we saw what it did to the Oni Warriors, and we're just going to say no more Shiva. So banning that away right away.
Yeah, Shiva was a pick for Layers as well yesterday up against the Leviathans. Went 2-1-1 in a loss. And so there were moments of success for Layers on this pick, but maybe didn't feel confident or strong enough about the pick to want to leave that open to maybe a pick there for the Valhalla Valkyries. Gleedna, of course, going to get banned away. That's an afterthought at this point. 64% across the SPO, and I expect that number to continue to climb up just a little bit further. So, if you're the Valkyries here, you've already taken a shot at Layers, you've taken Gleedna off the table, and that's so strong out of the solo lane and out of the jungle. And so I think good, just sort of general bans here from the Valkyries. Could say the same for the Titans. Bellona just so strong in her own right out of that solo lane. Seems like, Charlie, no real specific hardcore bans towards pocket picks for any of these players. Just going down the tier list and maybe outside of the Shiva, as you mentioned, for Kirmi. As Khepri ends up being the final ban here for the Valhalla Valkyries. Umoja left open, and the strong duo lane for the Titans just got a whole lot stronger. Aurora on one of his favorite picks.
I like to see that the Valks haven't put any sort of stock in banning out Paul. Either A, saying, hey, his god pool is so deep, there's no reason that we try to ban it out, or B, maybe that's the confidence of Benny Q saying, I think I know how to deal with Paul in this lane. We are going to, both of these teams like playing through their mid laners. Both of these mid laners have the potential to hard carry games. And I think Benny's saying, give him the Zeus, give him the Morgan, give him anything that he wants. We're going to be able to deal with it and at least try to get me a counter pick or something like that. So first option here, they have 2 picks available. The Valks, will they hold on to Benny Q's pick like they usually do? It's certainly an option.
Now, I think this is an interesting stat where when teams are able to, at least in the 2 sets that we've seen so far from the Valkyries this year, when teams have been able to shut down Benny Q, that's when they beat this Valkyries team. Again, you can't, not all the eggs are in the Benny Q basket, but in the win versus the Solar Scarabs, Benny Q goes 10-0-8, followed by 1-3 and 3-5 in the 2 losses against the Solar Scarabs. In the Game 1 win against the Oni Warriors, Benny Q goes 6-1-6, followed by 0-4 and 1-8 in the 2 losses up against the Oni Warriors. So needless to say, you're going to have a rougher KDA when your team is losing. But those are brutal KDAs for Benny Q, and so when there's a concerted effort put against him there in the mid lane, difficult to come back against. This is a little unique, though. Benny Q getting his pick this early on in a draft, and it's a Zeus. Now, Zeus is strong enough, Trelly, that maybe warrants an early pick, but could open the door to some punishment in the rest of the Titans draft.
I would say so. I mean, picking the Zeus into not only the Umoja, which you saw, you knew the Rivers Rebuke would be there, you knew your positioning has to be top tier if you're able to avoid these walls. Now, we're seeing the Cthulhu, and even possibly an AMC mid. It could be in the ADC role as well. We're going to hold on to that flex option, but more often than not, we see this AMC in the mid lane. It's going to have some solid clear to match up into the Zeus. Now, both of you are pretty immobile. You get some movement speed built into the kit with, AMC having the Hives and Zeus having the Shield Toss. But I think this matchup specifically, it's going to be hard to survive on Zeus just looking at this double Guardian composition.
You told me you're a mid laner, right?
Yes.
We replaced aggro into the design team. You come in, so we still gain a mid laner here. Do you enjoy the hunter style of meta out of the mid lane? Like, is that something mid laners in general sort of, would you rather just stick to I mean, now mages are still very viable right now, but it feels like AMC, maybe Chiron, a couple of those ability-based mages are at the forefront. Is that a style you enjoy playing?
I certainly don't. I mean, it's one of those things where if you want to get ahead early, you're always going to outbox the mage counterpart you're against. You can sort of get a lead there, but I just prefer to play mages. That's why I like the mid lane, and now that it's switched up, it really just...
I don't want to play hunter.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I try to avoid ADC if possible for that exact reason. But I think the mid lane mages still have pressure into the hunters if they can play accordingly, and obviously Zeus, some of the best early clear in the game with the shield toss, so I don't think he'll be sitting too far behind in that lane, but again, the double Guardians are more so what I'm looking at here.
Yeah, Umoja plus Cthulhu is a difficult front line to go up against. AMC can play more ability-based and can build more ability-based. You can kind of bridge that gap maybe sometimes between Mage and ADC. Bastet ends up being the pick here for Kirmi, is what it ends up looking like, though. With a Cabrakan locked in, who knows? Could be Cabrakan solo, could be Cabrakan jungle, and then Bastet could fill either of those other 2 roles as well. So you've got a lot of burst damage. Only 1 game of Bastet played for Kirmi in the 6 that we've seen the Valkyries play, and it was a win in the first game of the phase, first game of the year for the Valkyries. 4-3-8 is what Kirmi put up on Bastet in their first set of the year. And so there's some flexibility there. I want your take on the Cabrakan, though, in general here, Trelly, because I feel like it's a green light or a red light, depending on how some of the early game can go for this pick. We have seen Cabrakan shut down, and we have seen Cabrakans take games over. It sometimes feels like there's not a whole lot of middle ground there. Do you like what you've built around this Cabrakan if you're the Valkyries?
Yeah, the Cabrakan has some success into this matchup. Looking at AMC, the walls are going to be very annoying to deal with. Obviously, Cthulhu, if you're in the position where you're walling Cthulhu, that's one thing, but as we both are looking at this Wheelix pick from Layers. That's going to be, there's only one leap at the moment, but I'm looking more so at the knockup. You have Yamoja with the Riptide, Cthulhu, Descent into Madness has the ability to knock up as well. So this is a draft that's going to have to get online early because, again, a Wheelix more so wants to get active, you know, levels 5 to 12. That's where he's going to find a lot of success because of how much damage she has in the early game. But on the flip side, it's very difficult to dive Zeus. Even as a Wheelix, he's just going to drop the Lightning Storm, and you're going to have to play around that. You're always going to be taking a lot of damage there.
Well, you saw the one game win, one pick, one win for a Wheelix. That was Layers in a win up against the Jade Dragons. 2-1-7 was his KDA in that game. Cernanos started to rise up the pick list just a little bit here as of late. Some of the buffs that we've talked about plenty have made him a little bit more viable. Still needing what we assume is well, I was going to say a support pick maybe, but could end up being a solo lane pick if this Achilles gets locked in. And Achilles is locked in. Only one game of Achilles we've seen so far here this year in the SPL. Likely means, Trelly, that I guess Cabrakan would be over in support. A lot of pressure in that lane.
Yeah, I actually like the Achilles pick here. Into Cthulhu specifically, he has a lot of HP, but that threshold for his execute just means it's that much bigger. If you are Aquarius on this Achilles right now in the lane, which we've already mentioned, there is a bit of flex potential with this draft, so we'll have to see where everything goes. But Achilles into Cthulhu specifically, if you can get tanky online and then just sort of play around your carries, executing Cthulhu in the Descent into Madness is a great way to start the fight. I mean, it's such a big target. It's very difficult to miss that execute, and then of course, 40% of his HP or 30%, whatever the threshold may be, it's very high for that such a high target character.
Right, and Cthulhu, we saw in our first set of the day how difficult it was to kill off Haddix, right, on Cthulhu. Shortening up the margin that you need, shortening up the amount of damage that you need to kill off such an obnoxious pick to go up against is always going to be beneficial. So I like this from the Valkyries. Do yourself some favors, right? I mean, there are a lot of instances that I'm still worried about for the Titans, but give yourself an out to some of the difficult nature of this Tartarus Titans draft. That said, still won't catch me sliding a Yamoja Cthulhu front line with an AMC and CERN in the back. Though it feels like a lot of this, I mean, Cthulhu and Soul Laners will always do their damage, right? But a lot of this big burst damage is going to be coming from physical sources, AMC, Wheelix, and CERN there as well. What level of concern are you at about the ability to itemize against the style of damage the Titans are bringing?
Yeah, usually when we see this double Guardian comp, it is a hard damage solo laner like Cthulhu, and then matched up with another hard damage Guardian, something like a Bacchus. But Yamoja more so wants to look for the lock-in and spam the heals, look for the Riptide to displace her target, but she still does have a fair amount of damage built into the kit if you can just spam the water bubble. So I don't think the Titans are really lacking in the magical damage either here. It's just going to be, will these hunters get online? Will they get to that late game where they're able to shred everything effectively? Because AMC and CERN has a lot of penetration in their own right, just built into the kit with the Stinger and the stances from Cernanos.
Well, and just because of the way the draft went now, we can assume that Bastet ends up in the jungle. Bastet versus Wheelix, I think, has the ability to be pretty interesting here. Layers on one side versus Kirmi on the other. Do you imagine power curve starts to look similar here, Trelly? Do you think both junglers have the ability to get active at a similar point in this game?
Yeah, I think they both are. They both have a pretty strong early game, but my issue with the Wheelix pick is how effective will you be in the late game? If it does get to the point where you do have double ADC, right? But Layers will be vastly ineffective except for just trying to pull in Kirmi off the pounce, which in its own right is really all you need to do late game because you have that double ADC comp, you have that shred, you don't really need that much damage. But the issue is if a Wheelix gets behind, she's very hard to really come back from that. Her damage sort of falls off, especially against a pick like Zeus, where that's your main target, right? You want to try to get this immobile mage and just try to shut him down, but just drop the Lightning Storm. It's hard to get close to Zeus.
Yeah, and I am curious about that because that's how the team fights may look later on here in this game. But it feels like when you've got a mid lane with a Zeus and an AMC in it, there's got to be some emphasis there from junglers, right? Because I think you look back to our last set, where Shinta's on the AMC and just gets jumped on by Lasbra over and over and over again in the early game. Got to be similar potential in this one, right? I mean, whether it's AMC or Zeus that's being jumped on, whether it's a Bastet or an Wheelix, do you think the junglers have some eyes for the mid lane here?
I would say so. Yeah, I mean, both of these mid laners are going to need some peel to survive. And that's why I imagine the Titans went for this sort of double Guardian style. Maybe Cthulhu and Yemoja just have the range to say, hey, we'll deal with the Zeus. You know, Layers, you can look for that 1v1 jungle matchup. You can try to find a knock-up and a pull, but besides that, don't go towards that Lightning Storm. You really don't want to take that much. So I think that sort of draft that they've went for here does benefit their comp a little bit.
Can the Tartarus Titans get back on track? Can the Valkyries find their first set win of the year? Game 1 will get us closer to some answers.
Well, so far, the Valkyries have been able to find successful game 1s in all of their sets, but haven't been able to get those last couple of games to close things out. It's J-Mac, it's Mifflin, and it's Rosie here in our second set of the day. You're throwing some praise over towards Rosie. I saw the little post you put over on Twitter. Just some nice camera work so far.
What's my Twitter?
Mifflin TV.
That's right. Go make sure you go follow it, everybody in the
what's
chat. J-Mac Tucker with an underscore.
Where is the underscore?
It's between J-Mac and Tucker?
No,
it's at the ends. Yeah.
No, it's before.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, man.
That's literally the worst spot you could have put it. Why'd you do that?
Because I had something before that and then underscore, then J-Mac Tucker. But now I got rid of the part that was before. It's all
Good
confusing.
God.
It's all stupid. I can't even get my actual handle. Let's get back into the game, though, and talk about this one. A very control-oriented comp here out of Tartarus Titans, especially with the roar on this Yemoja, SOT. A lot of space creation that can come from this Cthulhu. Meanwhile, the Valkyries, this Achilles pickup was one that was talked a lot about to try and deal with this Achilles. I mean, we saw last game with the bolts how hard it was to actually kill Haddix. But if you have an execute, you don't have to kill him all the way. You can just get him down most of the way.
Yeah, just do 60% of the work first, and then from there, Aquarius should be able to get a handle on it. Gamma gets canceled out of the Tremor a little bit early. Had he been able to clear that wave, things would have been looking tough as Layers doesn't need to worry. It's Chain Lightning, all right? It's level 2 Zeus. He doesn't have Detonate just yet, but Layers going to spend a good bit of time just re-sustaining the jungle now already out of potions. That's a concern for a Wheelish. You know, Charlie said it's similar power curve. I'd argue between a Wheelish and Bastet, a Wheelish likely will be getting involved earlier on. So you want this portion of the game to be that point for a Wheelish where she is getting powerful. Level 3, Feather Step is essentially an execute. I mean, watch this damage.
That's a lot of damage. It's also a bees out of the mid laner. BennyQ running as fast as he
he's
can.
done.
Slowed down by the Honey, and one more auto. It's Layers on the board first for the Tartarus Titans.
That's exactly what you want. I thought maybe Layers would have to spend a little bit more time re-sustaining. Not the case. Was able to heal up very quickly and get involved yet again on the map. That said, Kirmi got to solo out essentially an entire wave. So despite Layers picking up first blood for himself, gold advantage over the Titans jungler, XP advantage now over to Kirmi, who should took over to level 5 first. And speaking of a level 5 Bastet, that is a very strong displacement tool. And looking at the beads from the Tartarus Titans, there aren't a whole lot of them. Maybe you're able to lock down Aurora. Similarly, you could lock down Layers, no CC immunity available to him. Nothing really just yet for SOT. We don't know where he's going. Could be that he picks up a teleport. Could be it's a beads, depending on the pacing of this lane.
No, we don't know where Aquarius is going either. Neither of these solo laners have picked up their first relic, and that's become somewhat of a common trend as of these last couple of weeks, is these solo laners don't really know what they want to go with first, and because not a whole lot typically happens over here unless one of these junglers tries to get active, it seems like Kirmi maybe waiting for the dash out of SOT before they make an engagement here. Now that it's been used, SOT will be fine though. Kirmi instead a little bit more active towards this blue buff.
Yeah, that's the answer to Cthulhu, who is not the greatest lane bully, is to make sure that he isn't allowed to get that blue buff for himself. Unfortunately for Kirmi, spends so much time hovering nearby. Layers farms up the jungle, then shows up just on time for the blue, so we'll close up that XP gap that Kirmi was able to establish for himself. Worth noting, Layers also got first blood, so he's got a gold advantage, significant leaps for the jungler of the Tartarus Titans, and he is very close to hitting some pretty significant power spikes himself. Gravity Surge has got some great targets. Kirmi is going to give up that opportunity twice, leap in and then the leap back out, both gravity surgeable. Not a word I thought I'd ever have to use. And then you've got some knockups from Aurora that should be able to set you up relatively easily with those Riptides.
Well, that's the fun part of casting, is sometimes you get to say words that you don't know if they're actually words, but we're going to make them words, by God, out here. So gravity surgeable.
Yeah.
Or just surgible, I guess, in this case. Gravity is the precursor there at the beginning of that one. But Paul over here on this AMC didn't go so hot for Shinto in their previous set. He was kind of getting farmed a little bit early on in the game. Went down like 3 deaths in just as many minutes there, but Paul has been much safer on this AMC, or maybe even just more aggressive. We saw him, he was already going up behind that tier 1 tower to help get that kill on BennyQ earlier on. The Tartarus Titans, even with just that first blood, have been able to get a little bit of extra neutral farm across the map. About 1,000 gold up the Titans have.
Yeah, it's going to be much more difficult for the Valkyries to shut down Paul on this AMC. Zeus, sure, has a lot of damage output, hard for him to apply it, and Kirmi Going to need a couple more items before he's really able to do it all on his own. Small skirmish around these left camps immediately let up. Kiermi just not interested in fighting when Layers is around. If this Awelish is nearby, Kiermi just getting out of dodge.
Layers actually pulling some nice little tech here. We keep seeing new things come around with these obelisks, these offering camps. You know, we see how the meta has kind of shifted around there. Beginning, it was obelisk. 4 minutes in, you get your first set of camps, and you're diving that back on. You're going all the way to that enemy obelisk. You're trying to steal those flowers out. And we see that whenever a camp is on cooldown, once that 4 minutes hits and the obelisk spawns in, changes itself up. Layers actually deals like 90% of the camp's damage, lets that 4-minute mark hit, and then only has to deal with slightly enhanced damage out of that camp to pick up that offering there. So smart little plays here out of the Titans jungler.
And the Valhalla Valkyries really are just trying their best to put some pressure onto this blue buff, but Layers has been on time every single time. That's a 3-man rotation from the Chaos team just to try and put SOT behind, and goes unrewarded yet again. Kiermi and Gamma sacrificing some of their farm to rotate over. Kiermi just now ticking over to level 5. Layers comfortably at 6. Gamma just now ticking over to level 5. Aurora, well, he's been there for a little while now. The Tartarus Titans getting the better end of this macro farm, and you can see it reflected in the golden experience as well. It's just first blood as far as objectives separating these two squads. Maybe some small macro, the mid camps specifically, going over the Tartarus Titans. And it's just adding up very slowly. That said, the Valhalla Valkyries have got a very nice scaling composition between this Zeus, the Medusa, and Kiermi on this Bastet that they don't need to concern themselves too much.
Benny Q gonna use the beads early on and drop the lightning storm at his feet at that tier 1 tower. But all the while, 2v1 kill on the right side of the map. Gamma rotates over to help find a pick up against SOT. Seems to not have that Descent into Madness ready to go at the time of that rotation. Aquarius getting the credit to that kill there. It seems the execute was all that it needed.
Yeah, and a little bit of help from the Kabrakan as Benny lines up against Aurora. Aurora just being annoying. Doesn't even have the Ohm to put any genuine threat out. Doesn't have the ultimate either. Seems like Layers may have been willing to rotate forward, but well, even with Suku and a speed buff, wouldn't be fast enough to get there in time. But now with Aquarius comfortably in the lead, about 1 level, and already itemizing to deal with SOT in the lane. Runic Shield already picked up. It's going to shred away some of that power, give you some protections and some power in your own right. I think now, the Valhalla Valkyries, they could just leave him alone over there. Aquarius, he should be able to take that 1v1.
Yeah, we do have Paul back over here into the mid lane. And talking about these mid laners here, I mean, Benny Q has gone for a Vamp Shroud, and I don't know, we haven't seen very much on these mid laners, but we do see it's just an easy rotation over and a perfect wall to catch that dash from SOT, and then the execute after by Aquarius will make sure to finish the job there. So solid kill out of the Valkyries in the solo lane, but going back towards Benny Q here, I mean, Vamp Shroud, we've been seeing it a lot in the solo lane Guardians more than anything else, anytime that it goes over there. Not often that we see these mid laners picking this item up.
No, just a little bit of survivability now for Benny Q. He's got some great transformation, or upgrades rather, for this item. The Blood Soaked in particular, one that I think we will likely see. Generally when it is Vampiric Shroud in that first slot, especially on a Zeus, we do see matched up with it the standard book build, Book of Thoth into Breastplate of Valor, then Book of the Dead for that additional survivability. Matches up very well with the inherent protections of this item, but instead, double flat penetration, just saying, all right, Vampiric Shroud on its own. That's all I need.
We'll see where the rest of his build goes. I always love seeing the Sacrificial Shroud personally. You know, doing just a lot of extra damage is nice, but I guess without any actual lifesteal into your build or any kind of self-sustain, it does make it a little bit more de-incentivizing to be losing out on some of your health for that extra boost of damage. We'll see where Benny Q itemizes for the remainder of this game. Paul, meanwhile, goes for a Transcendence first item, nearly fully stacked up.
Oof.
Gamma goes for the ultimate, but comes up just a tad bit shy there. Quick Riptide out of Aurora gets him out of there.
He does. Soul Laners have already made the rotation towards this mid lane. Thought maybe we'd see a heavier skirmish around that camp, but SOT at level 9 doesn't want to line up against Aquarius, who is already starting to deal a ton of damage and has that execute available with all that AoE damage. The Valhalla Valkyries have gotten their mid 3v3. Gotta think they want to take
There
it.
goes in. Aurora's in danger. Aurora's not making it out of there. Detonate from Benny Q will deal the last blow. But Layers, Paul, and Cyclone have all regrouped. But it seems that without their support, they're not willing to dive back in this 4 versus 3. Valkyries find another pick.
But what can they do with this space created? Not many objectives, maybe a dive.
They would just go for the kill, they say. It'll be a Tremors under the tower, but Paul will be fine. Layers gets on out of there. No beads to this Wheelish as of now. So if that ultimate from Kiermi would have connected there, could have spelled the death of Layers, but unfortunately just a tad a bit off the mark.
Does at least cost Layers his blink. Shell lost for Aurora as well as his ultimate, and that is a very long ultimate. Yamoja going to be a couple minutes so she can get involved yet again. And the Valhalla Valkyries are off to a nice start. They're able to establish some pressure, start controlling those mid camps a little bit more so. You can see it now. The chart's starting to dip down a little bit, find itself back in a neutral state. And I would argue neutral likely favoring the Valhalla Valkyries. It is just so hard to play into a late game composition that just straight up has a Zeus in it on its own. That's how strong that pick is individually, but even the composition built around it is going to facilitate that Zeus very well.
Well, it is traditionally the double flat pen out of the mid lane for these mages. Not going to be the case here for Benny Q, at least not yet. Going for a percent pen, second item. Obsidian Shard will be the item out of the mid laner for the Valkyries. Aurora playing with fire up here. I mean, he is in dangerous territory consistently throughout this game. We saw him at bat camps earlier on. Now we're seeing him just casually stroll through the jungle here on this Yamoja.
Yeah, Aurora's one to play with Wild Abandon. That's been his MO since day one. All the way back since the Fat Chunks days, he's been a very aggressive support player. I am curious how aggressive he's playing with so little ohm, without his defensive relic and without his ultimate. That is concerning. As now the Valhalla Valkyries start to work their way over towards that right side of the jungle yet again. Think maybe they want to play around. Yep, the Pyromancer pulled out immediately. What's the response from the Titans? Gold Fury pulled out.
And Pyromancer will go down to the Valkyries. That one will be nice and easy. A Lightning Storm expended. But as highlighted, the Gold Fury is going to be accosted on the opposite side. Tartarus Titans with a fast response. They'll be able to tie up that objective for objective. But that'll keep the gold at pretty much the exact same point that we were. Valkyries just slightly bouncing back and forth around that lead. Only about 300 ping-ponging between these two teams.
Yeah, the Valhalla Valkyries doing a very good job matching that macro pressure that the Tartarus Titans have been able to establish themselves. That said, all the kills the Valhalla Valkyries have picked up so far have not found the most ideal targets. Generally, you want to shut down an AMC pretty early on. You'd love to start rotating over towards Cyclone Spin, both playing hunters that don't have any way to deal with the walls that Gamma is able to spawn up. But so far, not a lot of pressure towards that dual lane. I don't think we've seen a single rotation from either jungler towards the long. And, well, Paul's doing just this. Toss out an ability from downtown and walk himself into the jungle.
Yeah, he'll be able to go back and clear up a lot of these camps here, or maybe just let Aurora take that back camp by himself. Give the support some of their own farm here. But this is something that we talk about with teams like the Titans, teams like the Leviathans, these backliners that like to sit back, farm up as long as they can,